Okay, great. Thank you all for coming. Who here is feeling happy today? Who here is not feeling happy today? Woo, okay, one person. No, thank you for your honesty, Carl. You're always such a joy. So, I guess, to start off, I'll talk a bit about my own view and kind of what I've seen about just who's using Ethereum. And so, there's the Ethereum community is big. There's many kinds of people in the Ethereum community. There's individual developers, there's startups, there's enterprises, there's people living in far-flung countries that just use Ether as a cryptocurrency to get money back home. There's students, there's people building things, and different people are using Ethereum for different things. And at DEF CON, a lot of them, all of these communities definitely did come together. And the number of people there was not small. We sold over 4,000 tickets. It's definitely harder to see because the conference was kind of split between 10 different rooms in a way that it wasn't before. But the turnout was good, and I think the thing that impressed me even more than the turnout at the conference is also just the range of content and the range of things that people talked about. So this year, for example, we had a lot of speakers from the Ethereum community. We also had people from groups like UNICEF announcing they're doing things with Ethereum. We've had Audrey Tong come in to talk about Radical Exchange. We had a co-founder of Occupy Wall Street come in and talk about his ideas about using blockchains for social movements. A lot of kind of different people from a lot of different communities, and actually thinking about kind of not just Ethereum from the point of view of Ethereum, but Ethereum from the point of view of outsiders that have their own things that they care about that find Ethereum useful. Ethereum is currently being used for things, right? So recently we increased the gas limit of the Ethereum blockchain from 8 million gas per block to 10 million gas per block, about a 25% capacity increase. And guess what happened? Before the capacity increase, the blockchain was about 100% full. After the capacity increase, the blockchain was 100% full. Increased capacity and more people just came in. There's a lot of people who love Ethereum and wants to be part of it, but who are just waiting for basically scalability technology to let them. And this is one of the things that I'll be talking about today. Right? So there's a lot of different kinds of users of Ethereum, right? So financial applications are a big one, and for a long time we've been talking about simple payments. We're talking about ETH, DAI, other kinds of ERC20 tokens, decentralized exchanges. Uniswap has made exchanging between different assets on Ethereum extremely convenient, and this is something that did not exist as an option 1 year ago. Literally, Uniswap launched 11 and a half months ago, and it's been doing really well ever since. Other kinds of assets on chain, and there's people doing financial contracts on chain. There's people who are launching asset-backed tokens on chain. There's people actually trying to use financial contracts for non-trivial and interesting things. So, for example, there's a group that's doing hurricane insurance in Sri Lanka, and there's a couple of other pilots that are basically using smart contracts that hook into data sources on the internet and try to just write simple 50 and 100 line programs that just do insurance using smart contracts, and this is something people are actively starting to use. Other kinds of financial instruments. Even on the enterprise side, there's more and more things happening. one of the recent headlines that we've seen is IKEA just allowed an invoice to be paid using a basically fiat-backed token that's living on the public Ethereum blockchain. And the Santander Bank just did a bonds trade and implemented the business logic of a bonds trade on the public Ethereum blockchain. And this is kind of a big highlight I wanted to kind of share. And this is probably even kind of less from DEF CON, because DEF CON is more kind of the Ethereum community and kind of people who already like Ethereum talking to each other. This is more kind of an update from really my last kind of 1.5 months of travels through basically almost every country in East Asia, and as well as kind of Europe and other places, which is that public blockchains are being kind of legitimized even in mainstream enterprise discourse, right? So 3 to 4 years ago, when people were thinking enterprise blockchain, they were thinking, oh no, public blockchains are way too radical, and we need to just get 15 of our own guys together, make a little cartel, permission blockchain between them, get these 15 computers to talk to each other, and do a little thing and create some 5% efficiency gains between a couple of businesses. And people have tried doing this for a long time, and a lot of these projects just did not go anywhere. And a big reason why I think these projects fail is because they didn't see what was the biggest benefit of a public blockchain, which is a blockchain fundamentally is not a technical improvement, right? From a technical point of view, blockchains make things less efficient because you need every transaction to be verified a bunch of times. The benefit is social, right? And the benefit is basically that you have this platform that really is neutral, this platform where it's not controlled by kind of one single company that's running the application and has the ability to kind of change it in whatever way it wants. And these are benefits that kind of more limited systems just don't have the ability to provide, right? So there were just so many cases of people saying, oh, I'm going to make a consortium. I'm going to get 10 of the biggest companies together. And the first company enthusiastically joins on. And so they think, yay, this is a great idea. The second company does not enthusiastically join on, because as soon as the first company enthusiastically joins on, the second company and the third and the fourth all think that this project is just a puppet of the first company, and so it's not really a neutral thing that they're signing on to. And this is something that I've seen happen multiple times. I mean, even Libra has been seeing big challenges in convincing people that it's not Facebook coin or Mark Zuckerberg coin. And so I think, in a lot of ways, the last few years kind of really legitimized the position of public blockchain specifically as something, this kind of special grounds that has very unique properties that while other kinds of platforms, including centralized platforms, including kind of consortium platforms, can be useful, public blockchains as a building block in many kinds of applications, and possibly even the glue between these consortiums, are just indispensable. And this is something that people are recognizing everywhere. And I was visiting China for a week, and people are recognizing it in China. People are recognizing this in Europe. So it's a big step forward. And so I think enterprise equals permissioned is something that's kind of rapidly going away. And there's enterprises that are that, as I'll show later, really are willing to collaborate and participate with the public ecosystem. So other applications, blockchains go far beyond finance. And there's applications involving non-financial assets, game assets, even something as simple as selling conference tickets. So, for example, even for DEF CON, we had an experiment where we used a smart contract to sell some conference tickets, and it went really well. Selling conference tickets on the blockchain is actually a good user experience. You don't need to get two different databases, the money database and the ticket database, to talk to each other. You just do the payments on one database, and the computer program kind of transfers both assets in one transaction, and it's great. Different kinds of non-fungible tokens. Non-financial applications, many of them also tend to revolve around kind of revoking things. So for example, put university degrees on the blockchain, revoke them on the blockchain, check the blockchain to verify that some university degree or some other certificate or even some key that you've registered is still valid. And there's more and more people trying to do things like that. And there's, I think, a large chunk of non-financial industrial applications that are basically some version of like publish thing on chain and at some other time verify that thing has not been published on chain. And like even that one simple pattern is something that like you don't need to build much of a special platform for this. You can just like do it on Ethereum today. Financial business logic, so like these Santander Bank's bonds and issuing different kinds of financial instruments. So all of these things are happening, and kind of more interesting uses of payments are also happening, right? There's more and more people using cryptocurrency to distribute money to refugees, for example, and this is something that we've been seeing pilots happen in a lot of different countries. So a lot of use cases, and a lot of people want to do things on the blockchain, and there's not that much, right now, not that much space on the blockchain. Fortunately, this is a problem that we're kind of rapidly moving towards solving, right? So, Ethereum 2.0 progress. So I guess quick summary of phases of ETH2. There's basically 4 kind of major phases. Phase 0, get proof of stake running. Phase 1, sharding, so scalability, but starting with data. Then phase 2, add state and execution, which basically just mean computation and smart contracts. And phase 3 is basically kind of other stuff that we want to add down the line. We're here, and well, really we're here, right? So there's been already quite a huge amount of work and a huge amount of bidding, and recently we had this interoperability workshop in Toronto where all of the engineering teams that were implementing ETH2 clients got together and kind of got the clients to kind of follow the same protocol, kind of speak the same language, and talk to each other. So a lot of progress happened in the last 1.5 months, and now we're basically hurtling full speed ahead to having a public test network, which is the last major milestone before we can have a main network. At the same time, phase 1 is kind of continuing to be worked on. It saw a fairly kind of significant simplification and fairly recently. So the simplification basically says instead of having shards talk to each other once every 10 minutes, so that you need kind of fancy layer 2 protocols if you want to move your stuff around more quickly, we just have shards talk to each other every 10 seconds, and we do the work of like making that happen efficiently enough. And so that's something that is, and it turns out that this is something that kind of significantly increases the simplicity of the protocol, also really decreases the complexity of the infrastructure that you need to build to make the protocol useful. So progress. There's some ETH2 teams that are starting to look at implementing phase 1 kind of in parallel with all of the work involved in getting phase 0 to production quality. So a lot of very active progress all around, and we're continuing to expect, or for like early next year, to have proof of stake network running. By the way, this presentation has like a new thing I'm experimenting with is like fancy QR codes if you want to see the links. So like, I don't know, like photo them and then zoom in and then like do whatever on your phone. Like, I don't know, the kids these days know how to do this stuff. So aside from this, so ETH2, ETH2 is radical, and ETH2 is great, and ETH2 is a kind of potentially like 100 to 1,000 factor scaling increase, and ETH2 is the future. But at the same time, ETH2 is not literally tomorrow. Fortunately, there are things that are literally tomorrow, and so one of these things, and these are things that are not literally tomorrow, these are things that are literally today, client improvements. So a year ago, like running an Ethereum full node was very difficult. Now running an Ethereum full node, despite the higher scalability, despite the increased amount of time accumulating junk in the blockchain, running a full node is less difficult. And this is all possible thanks to the hard work of the Go development team, which has done a really good job over the last year of improving efficiency. You can now, instead of syncing in 11 hours, sync in 4 hours. Or if your internet is slow, instead of 40 hours, 14 hours. If your internet is fast, instead of 3 hours, 1 hour, like you know how to divide by 3. And also, we've seen the Nethermind client. So this is a kind of new team that's developed a new Ethereum client. And so you should try it out. You should run it. And it syncs. It works. I've tried it. My computer is still intact. Now, so that was today. This is today and tomorrow. Optimistic Rollup. So Optimistic Rollup is a layer 2 scaling solution that provides significant kind of medium level scalability gains now. And it provides scalability gains that are not as large as you can get with sharding or with Plasma or with state channels, but it provides scalability gains that are very real. So after the Istanbul network upgrade, which is expected to happen on the testnet this month, on mainnet like maybe a month or and a bit from now, we can expect to see, I think it's about 4,000 transactions per second in the absolute best case. So in the absolute best case where people are just doing payments and everyone is running on a rollup, but even in kind of more realistic cases, you get getting over 1,000 transactions a second. And unlike things like Plasma and channels, Optimistic Rollup does not have a hard time supporting things that are more complicated than payments. You can just run smart contracts in the thing. And third, instead of just being an ETH research post or some idea or half-broken a hunk of code in theory, there's a demo, unipig.exchange. Here's the QR code, and you can like scan it, and you can go there, and it's great. So basically, Optimistic Rollup is this scalability technique that says, well, we're gonna do computation off-chain, we're gonna put data on-chain, and data is generally cheaper than computation, and we're gonna try really hard to compress the data, and basically you can get like something like 2 orders of magnitude of scalability gains, and this is something that you can use today, and it will continue to get better tomorrow. So, I mean, like honestly, even if Ethereum 2.0 was like delayed by another 2 or 3 years, like this thing could easily kind of carry us all the way until then. I mean, so that's scalability. Privacy technology. Who here thinks privacy is important? Who here thinks privacy is not important? Okay, that's good. I mean, so privacy, right? So the big kind of story in privacy technology this year, I think, has been general purpose zero knowledge proofs. Right? So general purpose zero knowledge proofs basically allow you to prove things about computation and prove things about information that you have, or even prove things about transactions without publicly revealing that information. And many people are probably familiar with the word zk-snark. Zk-snarks have existed for a while. They're already used in Zcash. But like this year, and especially over the last 2 months, I mean, in large part thanks to Ethereum Foundation funded work, but also kind of supported by Zcash Foundation and co-supported by a lot of academic groups. I mean, we've seen a huge kind of alphabet soup of protocols with with funny names like Plonk, Sonic, Marlin, Shark. There's a bunch of them, right? And these protocols, they're more efficient than before, they're more general purpose than before, and the trusted setup requirements are much simpler and lighter than before. So for example, with Snarks, before you had to do a separate trusted setup for every new program you wanted to prove things about. With Plonk, you only have to do one trusted setup for every program. I mean, much easier for developers to work with. So a lot of progress happening on this front, and a lot of progress on using these technologies, right? So one of the kind of things that I've always talked about and have liked in the Ethereum community, right, is that the Ethereum community is kind of diverse in many ways. And first of all, in the Ethereum community, obviously has people in every continent in the world. You know, we've even been to Africa this year, and there's a lot of people, locals based there building cool things. Also, we have people from kind of the pure blockchain world, and also people from the enterprise world, and it's always been kind of part of my vision to try to kind of get these communities to collaborate with each other, because ultimately they have the same needs, right? If you're a kind of regular human being using, who is just an individual that wants to use blockchain applications, you want privacy. If you're an enterprise, you want privacy. And so a lot of the time there's a lot of kind of overlap in things that people want. And when one of these groups builds something for its own use, that a lot of the time that code can be taken and it can be repurposed for in other communities' use. So here we've had kind of enterprise-focused groups. One is Nightfall by Ernst & Young. The other is Zeph by Clearmatics, which is a company building a kind of permission settlement solution based on Ethereum for kind of some major banking institutions. And they both created kind of privacy solutions. They've open sourced the code. And I mean, here's like magic QR codes, and you can read articles about them. And there's a lot of progress that's been happening on both of these. Developer community-driven privacy tech, Tornado Cash, send 0.1 ETH, get 0.1 ETH out to some other address. And this is really nice because, like, basically it's something that you can already use if you just want a bit of privacy, so you can send some ETH to a separate account for just to pay some transaction fees for non-financial applications, right? So if you want like some separate account that you can use to like interact with ENS or whatever, then you can just do that, and you can have some separate account, and you don't need everyone to see kind of the connection between all of your activity. So a lot of progress on privacy. So one other piece of good news, right, is that all of these different technologies stack on top of each other. So optimistic rollup, medium scaling, sharding, high scaling, optimistic rollup on top of sharding, very high scaling. ZK snarks, privacy, sharding, scaling. ZK snarks inside sharding, privacy and scaling. ZK optimistic rollup, scaling. ZK snarks and on top of optimistic rollup, privacy and scaling. Yeah. So there, basically, kind of all of these different parts of the ecosystem that are trying to make Ethereum more powerful and useful in different ways, they combine with each other, they multiply with each other, right? And there's a lot of kind of really cool combinations that are coming out of this. So that's scaling and privacy. Another kind of thing there has been a lot of work on is governance technology, right? So governance is something that matters for a lot of things, right? So first of all, there's just kind of funding public goods inside of the Ethereum ecosystem that are just relevant to users and developers. So one example of this would be Ethereum clients. One example of this would be just research. One example of this would be getting smart contracts audited. One example of this would even be developing things like optimistic rollup or things like Uniswap. And we don't really have good ways of funding these public goods, right? Like sometimes you can make a project and you can kind of stick a coin into it and you can kind of try to ICO it, but like we know there's a lot of problems with that. And sometimes you can make a business and sometimes there's a business model, sometimes there isn't. And so kind of trying to come up with ways to kind of direct funding toward public goods better is like one kind of, I mean, you can call it a kind of governance question. Governing parameters to on-chain applications, and so something like MakerDAO, for example, that has this kind of decentralized US dollar on the blockchain needs to kind of have some parameter that says, well, where do we get the price of like of $1 relative to Ether? And this is something that needs to be maintained, needs to be updated over time, and it's also a governance question. Gathering community sentiment for protocol changes. There's controversial things happening in blockchain land all the time, whether someone wants a wallet recovered, whether there's a protocol change that is really necessary for safety but breaks 5 contracts that were written in some special way, whether it's a change that increases in efficiency at the cost of security or increases security at the cost of efficiency. There's always there's always controversial protocol changes that you want to kind of gather opinions for and kind of try to come to some kind of legitimate consensus. Decentralized social media applications. There's a lot of people that want to do things like this, right? Like make some kind of better social media thing on the blockchain, possibly using coins, possibly using something else. And it's figuring out these algorithms and even kind of implementing these algorithms is arguably a kind of governance question. So there's different kinds of governance technology, right? Privacy-preserving voting infrastructure, one example. So a lot of the time, kind of decentralized governance involves some form of voting, but if all votes are public, then this creates many problems, right? So if votes are public, then if you see how people vote, then you can pay them to vote for you, you can punish them if they don't vote for you, you can kind of interfere with the mechanism in a bunch of ways. And we've been seeing this happen in other blockchain ecosystems. Now, it turns out that a lot of this is something that can be solved with cryptography, and there's people that are actually trying to implement this right now. Quadratic funding. So quadratic funding is this kind of interesting and unique approach to funding public goods that basically says, if you can gather some money together and put it into some central pot, then you can kind of let people donate money to individual projects. And based on how much money people donate and based on how many people donate money to different projects, you use this mathematical formula to basically determine kind of what kind of subsidy each project gets from a central pot. It's actually this kind of really clever market mechanism that's kind of like halfway in between a market and a voting system. And I definitely encourage people to learn about it. There's kind of good articles about this. And it's also something that we've been testing on a small scale within the Ethereum ecosystem with the most recent round releasing about, I think, $200,000 in subsidies. And the rounds just ended, and it's actually doing a pretty good job of kind of selecting projects that deserve community support and kind of helping to fund things that would otherwise potentially have a hard time getting funded. Right? So 2 Ethereum clients, a wallet, a couple of independent developers, a podcast. I think if things like this work well, then we can, I think even next year, literally see at least 5 to 10 people that are able to describe their full-time job as working for a DAO, and that would be really interesting to see. So you don't have a boss; the community is your boss. So where do we go from here, right? So there's a lot of improvements happening in the Ethereum ecosystem to kind of meet the needs of growing Ethereum usage. There's a lot of Ethereum usage. So what's the plan, right? So path to phase 0 launch, there's basically kind of 3 big things that have to happen. And the good news is they can happen in parallel. And the Ethereum ecosystem is good at doing things in parallel because everything that I just talked about happened in parallel. So we need to have a kind of big public test network, a final review of the protocol, so a security review. We've already seen a couple of things that we need to change as a result of kind of existing security reviews. Some protocol simplifications, security audits of the clients, so not of the protocol but of the implementations of the protocol, and all of these things are kind of either starting to happen already or are going to happen soon. And after this, then we get the launch of Phase 0, and we get the kind of dawn of proof of stake, and the rest of the Ethereum kind of ETH2 will kind of get added on over time, kind of adding on new pieces kind of as each piece proves itself. And over the course of the next kind of 1 to 2 years, then we're going to basically be on this kind of interesting journey together of basically taking the Ethereum ecosystem and upgrading it to a new and more secure and so things coming soon. More developments to rollup, more developments to scaling technology, improvements to security, including wallets, including clients, including a lot of things, improvements to usability, improvements to privacy, and generally, today's ideas are tomorrow's demos, and today's demos are tomorrow's reality. So, thank you.
If you like that, come back for more. All you have to do is click like, always comment, we love that, and subscribe. And don't forget to watch the next one.